The morning mist drifted across the jagged peaks of Blackstone Valley, turning the towering cliffs into pale gray ghosts. Few humans had ever crossed those mountains and returned with stories. Fewer still had entered willingly. Yet Dakota, an Apache tracker known for his calm spirit and unshakable courage, climbed the narrow trail alone. Across his shoulders rested a worn leather pack, while a carved bow and quiver of arrows hung at his back. He had not come seeking glory or treasure. His people were suffering from a deadly fever spreading through their remote settlement, and the only herb capable of stopping it grew deep inside the forbidden Orc highlands. Every elder had warned him about the valley. They spoke of enormous warriors with green skin, iron axes, and fierce tempers who trusted no outsider. According to old stories, any human caught crossing their borders would never be seen again. Dakota listened to the warnings, but he also remembered the frightened faces of sick children and exhausted parents. If he returned empty-handed, many of them would not survive the coming winter. The path narrowed as he entered a forest of twisted black pines. Strange silence filled the air. No birds sang. No animals stirred. Dakota's instincts sharpened immediately. He sensed eyes watching him from somewhere beyond the trees. He stopped and raised both empty hands. "I seek no fight," he called into the forest. "I only ask for safe passage." His words disappeared into the silence. Then a heavy net crashed from above. Dakota tried to roll aside, but thick ropes wrapped tightly around him before he could draw his knife. Moments later, 6 towering orc warriors emerged from the shadows. Each carried massive spears and wore heavy armor decorated with wolf fangs and black iron plates. Their yellow eyes studied the trapped human with suspicion. One warrior stepped closer and grunted. "The human speaks our tongue." Another answered, "That makes him even more dangerous." Dakota remained calm. Struggling would only make things worse. "I came for healing herbs," he explained. "Nothing more." The orcs ignored him. They lifted the net between long wooden poles and carried him deeper into the valley. Along the journey, Dakota noticed something unexpected. Instead of savage ruins, the orc homeland held carefully built stone roads, sturdy wooden bridges, grazing animals, and families working together in peaceful villages. Children laughed while chasing one another through open fields. Blacksmiths hammered glowing steel beside roaring forges. Women gathered herbs near clear streams. The stories he had grown up hearing suddenly felt incomplete. Hours later, they reached an enormous fortress carved directly into the mountainside. Massive gates of dark oak slowly opened, revealing a great hall lit by blazing fire pits. Animal banners hung from stone pillars, and dozens of armored orc warriors stood in disciplined rows. At the far end sat the orc warchief upon a throne carved from black stone. His broad shoulders were covered by the hide of a great bear, and a heavy iron crown rested above stern golden eyes. Silence filled the hall as Dakota was brought forward. The warchief studied him for several long moments before speaking. "So," the giant rumbled, "a human walks willingly into my kingdom." Dakota bowed respectfully. "My village needs the moonroot herb. I ask permission to gather it and leave in peace." Instead of answering, the warchief slowly rose from his throne. He looked toward a side doorway. A tall orc woman quietly stepped into the hall. Unlike the warriors around her, she kept her eyes lowered. A long scar crossed one side of her face, while another marked her strong hands. Though plainly dressed, there was quiet dignity in the way she carried herself. The warchief's voice echoed through the chamber. "This is my daughter." Murmurs spread among the gathered orcs. The chief's expression hardened. "Every clan has rejected her." Dakota glanced toward the woman. For only a moment, their eyes met. Behind her sadness, he saw remarkable strength. Then the warchief delivered words that stunned the entire hall. "Marry my rejected daughter," he growled, "or leave these mountains forever." Dakota's breath caught in his throat. If he refused, he would lose his only chance to save his people. If he accepted, his life would change forever. For the first time since entering Blackstone Valley, the fearless Apache found himself completely unable to speak. Dakota barely slept that night. The Orc Warchief had not demanded an answer immediately. Instead, he ordered that the human be treated as an honored guest, but closely watched. 2 silent guards escorted Dakota to a sturdy stone cabin inside the fortress walls. The room was simple yet comfortable, with a warm fire, a wooden bed, and fresh bread left on a table. It was far kinder than the prison cell he had expected. As dawn painted the mountains gold, Dakota stepped outside. The fortress was already alive with activity. Warriors trained in the courtyard while blacksmiths shaped glowing iron into axes and farming tools. Women prepared meals, and children laughed as they chased one another between stone houses. It was nothing like the savage stories he had heard growing up. "You're awake early." The gentle voice startled him. Turning, Dakota saw the Warchief's daughter carrying a basket filled with herbs. In the morning light, he noticed details he had missed before. The scar across her face looked old, not fresh, and her green skin bore dozens of smaller marks across her arms. They were the scars of someone who had survived hardship, not someone ashamed of it. "I couldn't sleep," Dakota admitted. She smiled faintly. Most guests don't. For a moment, silence settled between them. "I'm Dakota," he said. "I know. And your name?" She hesitated before answering. "Gracia." Dakota nodded respectfully. "It's a strong name." Gracia looked surprised. "Most humans don't think so. They've never met you." A faint blush spread across her cheeks before she quickly looked away. As they walked through the village, Dakota noticed nearly everyone greeted Gracia warmly. Children ran to hug her. Elderly orcs thanked her for delivering herbs. Even wounded warriors smiled when she stopped to check their bandages. "You're a healer?" Dakota asked. "I learned from my mother," she replied softly. After she died, someone had to continue her work. They soon reached a quiet garden growing along a mountain stream. Dozens of rare medicinal plants flourished there, including the silver-leafed moonroot that Dakota had risked everything to find. Relief washed over him. "My people can be saved." Gracia noticed the hope in his eyes. "You truly came for these herbs." "I did." She studied him carefully. "Many thought you were lying." "I don't lie about lives." Gracia smiled again. "I believe you." As they gathered herbs together, Dakota finally asked the question that had lingered in his mind. "Why did every clan reject you?" Gracia stopped working. For several moments she simply watched the water flow over smooth stones. "When I was 16, she began quietly, our village was attacked by mountain raiders." Dakota listened without interrupting. The raiders set fire to several homes. Children were trapped inside. She slowly rolled back one sleeve, revealing thick burn scars running nearly to her shoulder. "I carried 5 children out before the roof collapsed." Dakota stared silently. "The scars came from the fire." She nodded. "But that wasn't enough." "What do you mean?" Gracia sighed. "After the attack, an old shaman claimed the scars were a sign of an ancient prophecy." "What prophecy?" "That any warrior who married me would bring ruin upon his clan." Dakota frowned. "And everyone believed him?" "Fear is stronger than truth." Her voice held no anger, only quiet sadness. "One by one, every family refused my father's offers." Dakota looked around the peaceful village. "So they rejected the woman who saved their children?" "They thanked me." She forced a small smile. "But none wished to marry me." For the first time, Dakota understood why the mighty Warchief had spoken with such bitterness. His daughter had never lacked courage. She had only lacked someone willing to see beyond fear. As the afternoon sun warmed the valley, Dakota realized something unexpected. The woman every orc clan had rejected possessed more kindness, strength, and wisdom than anyone he had met in years. And for the first time since arriving in the highlands, the impossible choice before him no longer seemed quite so impossible. Dakota spent the next 2 days helping Grasha gather moonroot and other healing plants from the mountain slopes. The more time they spent together, the more his first impressions proved true. She was patient with frightened children, respectful to the village elders, and fearless when climbing dangerous cliffs to collect rare herbs. Despite the whispers that still followed her, she greeted everyone with kindness. Yet the Warchief's ultimatum hung over Dakota like a storm cloud. On the third evening, he stood alone at the edge of the fortress walls, looking toward the distant mountains that separated him from his home. He imagined the fever spreading through his village. He saw mothers sitting beside sick children, elders growing weaker with each passing day, and healers running out of every remedy they knew. He closed his eyes. "I cannot return without the moonroot," he whispered. A deep voice interrupted his thoughts. "Have you made your decision?" The Warchief stepped beside him, his heavy boots scraping against the stone. Though still imposing, the old leader looked more tired than angry. Dakota faced him calmly. "I have." The Warchief folded his powerful arms across his chest. "I will marry your daughter." For a long moment, the old orc said nothing. Then he gave a slow nod. "You choose wisely." Dakota shook his head. "I choose because my people need the medicine." The Warchief's eyes narrowed, but there was no insult in Dakota's honesty. "I expected no less." The following morning, preparations began for the wedding. Unlike the joyful celebrations Dakota remembered from his own people, this ceremony was quiet and solemn. Word spread quickly through the fortress that the rejected daughter was finally to be married, not to an orc warrior, but to a human Apache. Many orcs gathered in the great hall out of curiosity. Some whispered that the marriage would never last. Others claimed the prophecy would soon come true. Only a few smiled with genuine happiness for Grasha. She entered the hall wearing a simple dark green ceremonial dress embroidered with silver thread. Fresh mountain flowers had been woven into her long black hair, and for the first time since Dakota had met her, her eyes held a small spark of hope. Dakota wore his finest buckskin clothing, decorated with beadwork made by his late mother. Though far from home, he carried his family's traditions with him. The ceremony was unlike anything either of them had experienced. An orc elder placed their hands together over a stone bowl filled with spring water. "Strength without kindness becomes cruelty," the elder declared. "Kindness without strength cannot protect peace." He looked at both of them. "Today, two paths become one." The Warchief stepped forward and presented Dakota with a beautifully crafted iron hunting knife. "It belonged to Grasha's grandfather," he said. "Protect her as he protected our people." Dakota accepted the gift respectfully. "I will." Then Grasha surprised everyone. From a small leather pouch, she removed a delicate necklace made from polished eagle feathers and turquoise stones. "My mother made this many years ago," she said softly. "I wish for you to have it." Dakota carefully accepted the necklace before placing it around his neck. "It will always remind me of today." When the ceremony ended, there was no cheering. Only respectful silence. That evening, Dakota and Grasha shared their first meal as husband and wife in a small cabin overlooking the valley. At first, neither knew what to say. Finally, Grasha broke the silence. "You were honest with my father." Dakota nodded. "I couldn't begin our marriage with a lie." She smiled gently. "I know you married to save your people." He looked at her across the table. "I did." She lowered her eyes. "And I don't expect anything more." Her quiet acceptance touched Dakota more deeply than he expected. Instead of resentment, she offered understanding. As they finished their meal, Dakota noticed the herbs she had carefully bundled beside the door. "You gathered extra moonroot." Grasha nodded. "Your village will need more than you first planned." He looked at her with growing admiration. You've been thinking about my people. She smiled warmly. They're my people now too. For the first time since the impossible ultimatum, Dakota felt something change within his heart. Their marriage had begun as a duty born of desperation. But perhaps, with patience and trust, it could become something far greater than either of them had imagined. Nearly a month passed after Dakota and Grasha's wedding. What had begun as an uneasy partnership slowly settled into a peaceful routine. Every morning, they climbed the mountain trails together, gathering moonroot and other medicinal plants. In the afternoons, Grasha taught Dakota the names and healing properties of rare orc herbs, while Dakota showed her how the Apache tracked animals, read the wind, and found water even in dry lands. Though love had not yet been spoken aloud, trust had quietly taken its place. Then everything changed. One cold morning, the fortress gates burst open. An exhausted orc scout rode into the courtyard on a foam-covered wolf. His armor was cracked, and a deep cut ran across his shoulder. The eastern border, he shouted before collapsing from exhaustion. The Blood Fang war band has crossed the river. The courtyard fell silent. Dakota exchanged a worried glance with Grasha. The Warchief quickly gathered his captains inside the great hall. A large map was spread across a stone table, marked with wooden figures representing villages and mountain passes. The Blood Fangs have burned 2 settlements, one captain reported. They're moving west. Another slammed his fist onto the table. They're leaving no survivors. Dakota studied the map carefully. Their path leads toward the southern pass. The Warchief nodded grimly. And beyond that pass lies your Apache homeland. A heavy silence settled over the room. If the Blood Fang warband broke through the mountains, both the orc villages and Dakota's people would be caught in the invasion. They don't want land, Grasha said quietly as she examined the map. They want war. The Warchief looked at his daughter. What makes you say that? She pointed to the burned villages marked on the map. They destroyed farms but stole no food. Then she pointed farther east. They attacked watchtowers instead of supply routes. Dakota understood immediately. They're cutting communication. Grasha nodded. They want humans and orcs to blame each other before anyone learns the truth. The room grew silent. For years, old distrust had lingered between the two peoples. One carefully planted lie could ignite another generation of bloodshed. The Warchief turned toward Dakota. If your village sees armed orcs near the border, they'll think you're invading, Dakota finished. And if our warriors find armed humans, they'll believe the same. For the first time in decades, both races faced a common enemy, but neither side knew it. Dakota stepped forward. I need to return to my people. Several orc captains objected immediately. He'll betray us. Humans cannot be trusted. Before Dakota could answer, Grasha spoke firmly. My husband has never broken his word. The room fell quiet. She looked directly at the captains. He crossed forbidden mountains only to save lives. She then faced her father. If he does not warn his people, thousands could die. The Warchief remained silent for several moments before giving a slow nod. You will go. Dakota bowed respectfully. I'll return with anyone willing to listen. That evening, Grasha packed food, medicine, and bundles of moonroot into Dakota's travel bag. You shouldn't travel alone, she said. I'm faster by myself. She handed him a small carved pendant shaped like a mountain hawk. My mother carried this whenever she traveled. Dakota accepted it carefully. I'll bring it back. She smiled softly. I know. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then, without thinking, Dakota gently took her hand. I'll return. This time, the promise carried more than duty. Grasha squeezed his hand. I'll be waiting. Before sunrise, Dakota rode toward the southern pass, determined to warn his people before fear and lies consumed them both. Behind him, Gracia watched from the fortress walls until he disappeared beyond the mountains. Deep inside, she sensed that the greatest battle ahead would not only be fought with weapons. It would be fought against generations of hatred, and only truth, trust, and courage could prevent two nations from destroying each other. Dakota reached his Apache village after 2 days of hard riding. The moonroot herbs Gracia had prepared were immediately given to the healers, who worked day and night to treat the fever. Within days, the sick began to recover. Families who had feared losing their loved ones now had hope again. But there was little time to celebrate. Dakota gathered the village elders around the council fire and explained everything: the orc fortress, the warchief, his marriage to Gracia, and the approaching blood fawn warband. At first, the elders refused to believe him. Orcs have always been our enemies, one elder argued. Dakota shook his head. Not all of them. Another elder frowned. You expect us to trust them because you married one. I expect you to judge them by their actions. Before anyone could answer, a young scout raced into the camp. Smoke, he cried. The eastern farms are burning. Dakota's heart sank. The Blood Fawn warband had arrived sooner than expected. Meanwhile, in the Orc Highlands, Gracia stood beside her father as the first enemy horns echoed through the mountain valleys. The northern gate has fallen, the captain shouted. Hundreds of Blood Fawn warriors poured through the narrow pass, carrying black banners marked with crimson wolf heads. They attacked without mercy, setting homes ablaze and cutting down anyone who resisted. The warchief raised his enormous battle axe. Defend the valley. Gracia refused to remain behind. Instead of carrying only herbs, she strapped on a sword that had once belonged to her mother. If our healers fall, she said, no one survives. The battle spread across the valley. Dakota arrived with a group of Apache warriors just as the Blood Fawn army surrounded the fortress. For a heartbeat, both sides froze. Human warriors. Orc defenders. Years of distrust stood between them. Then Dakota rode forward alone. They are not our enemies, he shouted. The Blood Fangs want us to destroy each other. Some Apache warriors hesitated. Some orcs lowered their weapons. Then an enemy arrow flew toward Dakota. Before anyone could react, Gracia charged from the fortress gate. She threw herself between Dakota and the arrow. The shaft struck her shoulder with a sickening thud. She stumbled but remained standing. Dakota caught her before she fell. Gracia. She looked at him and managed a faint smile. I'm still here. Rage filled Dakota's heart. He stood, lifted his bow, and fired a single arrow that struck the Blood Fawn commander from across the battlefield. Seeing their leader fall, the enemy warriors faltered. The warchief seized the moment. Forward. For the first time in history, Apache warriors and orc soldiers charged side by side. They fought as one. Dakota defended wounded orc children. Orc warriors protected Apache families trapped near the burning fields. Gracia, despite her wound, continued treating injured fighters from both races without asking whether they were human or orc. Hours later, the surviving Blood Fawn warriors fled into the mountains. Silence slowly returned. Smoke drifted over the battlefield as humans and orcs stood together among the wounded. The old orc shaman who had once declared Gracia cursed stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. He looked across the battlefield, where Apache and orc families were embracing instead of fighting. Tears filled his ancient eyes. I was wrong, he admitted. My fear blinded me. He turned toward the gathered crowd. The prophecy spoke not of ruin, but of change. Everyone listened. The daughter I believed would destroy our people has instead united two nations. The warchief slowly knelt beside his wounded daughter. For the first time since her childhood, he placed a gentle hand on her head. I spent years trying to find someone worthy of you, he whispered. I never realized you were always the strongest among us. Dakota took Gracia's hand as the healers carefully removed the arrow. Looking into her tired eyes, he smiled. I accepted this marriage to save my village. He squeezed her hand gently. But today I fought because I could not imagine a world without you. For the first time since they met, Grasha's tears were not born from rejection. They were born from finally knowing she was deeply, truly loved. The battle against the Blood Fawn warband became a story told around campfires for generations. Where hatred had once divided the mountains, courage had built an unlikely bridge. Apache warriors returned to their homeland carrying not only victory, but a new respect for the orcs who had fought beside them. Likewise, the orc clans spoke with admiration of the humans who had crossed the battlefield to defend strangers. Grasha's wound was serious, but thanks to the skills of both Apache healers and orc herbalists, she slowly recovered. During the long weeks of healing, Dakota never left her side. Each morning he changed her bandages, prepared herbal tea, and read aloud the stories of his ancestors. In return, Grasha shared the legends of the Orc Highlands, telling him about the great stone bear, the first hunt, and the ancient spirits believed to guard the mountains. For the first time in their lives, they were not simply learning about each other, they were becoming a family. One bright spring morning, the Orc Warchief called together every clan leader and the Apache elders beneath the ancient stone circle, a place where no human had ever been invited before. Warriors from both peoples stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear the old leader speak. The Warchief stepped forward, leaning on his great axe. For too many years, he began, we allowed fear to choose our enemies. His deep voice echoed across the valley. My daughter was rejected because of a prophecy no one truly understood. Our people judged her by scars instead of her heart. He turned toward Grasha and smiled proudly. Those scars became the marks of the one who saved us all. The gathered orcs lowered their heads in respect. Then the Apache chief stepped beside him. Our people also carried old hatred, he admitted. We believed every orc was our enemy because that is what our fathers had taught us. Today we know better. The two leaders clasped forearms, sealing a peace that neither side had imagined possible. Cheers rose across the valley. In the weeks that followed, life changed in ways no one expected. Traders began traveling safely through the mountain passes. Orc blacksmiths crafted strong farming tools for the Apache villages, while Apache hunters taught the orcs new tracking methods that helped protect the forests from poachers and raiders. Herbalists from both cultures worked together, creating medicines more effective than either people had known alone. At the edge of the valley, Dakota and Grasha built a home where the mountains met the plains. It was unlike any other house. One side reflected Apache craftsmanship with carved cedar beams and woven blankets, while the other displayed orc stonework and heavy timber walls. Visitors often smiled and said the house looked as though two worlds had decided to live under one roof. Years passed peacefully. Soon, laughter filled the home as Dakota and Grasha welcomed two children, a daughter named Ayana and a son named Kor. The children learned to ride horses across the plains and climb the mountain trails with equal confidence. They celebrated Apache festivals beneath the open sky and orc harvest feasts inside the great fortress. To them, there was no divide between the two cultures. Both were simply part of who they were. One quiet evening, the aging Warchief visited their home. Watching his grandchildren race through the fields together, he smiled with tears in his eyes. I once feared my daughter would live her life alone, he said softly. Dakota looked at Grasha, who smiled back at him with the same quiet strength that had first caught his attention in the great hall. You gave me a choice, Dakota replied. At first, I thought it was the hardest decision of my life. And now, the old Warchief asked. Dakota wrapped an arm around Grasha's shoulders. Now I know it was the greatest gift I was ever given. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, humans and orcs gathered outside the little house for a shared meal, their laughter echoing through the valley. The rejected daughter had become the heart of a lasting peace, proving that love, honor, and compassion could accomplish what fear and prejudice never could. Her story would be remembered for generations, not as the tale of the orc no one wanted, but as the woman who united two nations and built a home between two worlds.